Hey everyone, I'm Steve Nason. I'm Research Director. I oversee our entertainment practice here at Parks Associates. And I am thrilled today to be joined by Amy McDonald. She is Senior Vice President of Product Experience Solutions at Everrise. How are we doing today, Amy?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Steve. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you.
Awesome. So Amy, why don't you give everyone out there just kind of an overview of Everrise and your role there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Thanks for that. So Everrise is an end-to-end BPO provider, evolving customer and product experiences for some of the world's most innovative, disruptive, and hyper-growth brands. Our approach ensures that we continuously uncover concise, specific guidance to fix potential issues long before they happen by preempting customers and product issues.
Okay, wow, yeah, that's great. So let's dive right into it. I got some questions for you, kind of about what you're seeing out in the market there to kind of help our audience with your perspectives on things. So first, kind of over the last couple of years, and obviously those last couple of years have included a major disruption, right? The COVID-19 pandemic. What are some of kind of the trends that you've been following in the digital media and connected entertainment space, both on the industry side and those that are involving consumers?
Yeah, I mean, great point that the pandemic has highlighted a lot of trends that we're seeing. Regarding industries that have been affected, it's sort of difficult to identify one that hasn't. Healthcare with telemedicine, gaming with live e-game events, security with doorbells and remote monitoring, fitness devices with streaming workouts, right? We've really sort of embraced the technology without realizing the struggle that we've had in previous innovations with digging cable, telephony lines, all of those kind of things, because we're now living in a cloud. So streaming services and bundled offerings from any device is definitely here and will continue to evolve to allow for more consumer and brand interaction during streams to boost followings, brand reputation, and obviously drive revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said you work hand in hand with clients, obviously on the product experience side. So what challenges are you seeing from your clients in this ever evolving? You mentioned some of the trends that are going on. They're obviously in a very unprecedented time, both on the business and consumer side. So what challenges or business problems are you trying to help your clients solve?
Sure, great question. As streaming is becoming more and more bundled, there's lots of decisioning that we have to help our consumers go through, as well as how to stand up those products on whatever device they're looking for support. So whether that is, like we mentioned, in a gaming scenario where it's coming from a console, or it's in a live broadcast event where you can be on any mobile device or any handheld device, it's becoming now a bundled service offering, and it's becoming more and more difficult to choose the actual bundle that you prefer based on favorite programming and user preferences and product offerings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's certainly all been about the bundling, no doubt.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the role of social media and forums and chat rooms and so forth. You talk about how your goal is to empower brands, right? So the role of social media has become in the last several years, such a major force in how brands present themselves to the market, and also how they appear to the competition and all that. So both on the industry side and consumer side, it's had a huge impact. Can you talk about the role of social media, chat rooms, forums, and more social side of things?
Yeah, right. We used to call them, all of those places, and now really that's just where we get our information.
Right.
There's over 20% of Americans are constantly and continuously in forums like Reddit and Quora, social networks like obviously the big ones of Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat. About 70, almost 70% of Americans are using these forums. And we've gotten very accustomed to user-generated content. that's driving consumer decisions. And,
Mm-hmm.
and in all transparency, it's driving product and brand decisions as well, based on the consumer insight and feedback that we're getting through these social sites and channels. So the channels are actually vital for us to understand the information, but it's super important for us to understand how to manage the processes, how to work through trust and safety issues, and ensure that really we have safety and loyalty from our product and consumers through the use of our own communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And sticking on the social media topic for a minute, obviously it's a place where there's a lot of exposure that brands can get, which can be positive. There's also the negative aspect of social media and how it reflects on a particular brand and so forth. What does that balancing act look like when you're helping out your clients, these brands? You mentioned you work with some of the major brands out there on how to protect their brand, right? Their brand equity, how to protect their customers, right? And then that balancing act, but also using it obviously as an effective marketing and sales tool.
Yeah. And there's actually a third leg of the stool in there, which is also protecting them, their moderators, who are then looking at all of this content, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. Trust and safety, like I mentioned, fraud, brand reputation, all in the forms of content moderation. They're extremely valuable to a brand. They come in, a proactive measure as well as reactive, where you're either out in the universe and you're trying to preempt levels of fraud or kind of rings that are interfering with your brand and that reputation. And then there's also the reactive side, where you then have to try and respond to things like viral posts and pulling things down and right. That's all part of brand reputation as well. So really, I'm thinking for digital media brands to be very effective at managing their content, they need to build a strong internal culture, really use the right technologies that provide real insights for consumers, products, and then have great thought out processes and guidelines around those methods of delivering.
Yes, absolutely. Let's kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about the role of technology and how technologies help better meet the needs and the challenges, right, that are in this market for those in the digital media space. Can you talk about the role of technology, how it's evolved, and what its role is?
Yeah, I love technology, right? I fully embrace technology. And I think that what technology has allowed for us is probably three things if I try and bucket them. In a connectivity bucket, we get faster speeds, more devices, more usage. We can put more people into a streaming event all at once. So connectivity has definitely played a role. AI and the use of self-service for all of the product and troubleshooting for customer issues has really helped drive down contact deflection. Or drive contact deflection so that we're not handling the same amount of call volumes. And that allows for people to realize and take away friction points and fear of usage, right? The more they can self-diagnose, it's not so scary anymore. And then honestly providing back that full loop circle of insights for understanding the customer and the product journey. Where are those friction points? How do we resolve them? How do we create seamless connections at any point in the life cycle of the customer and the product? And then give greater visibility back into brands for product innovation, service support, and future launches and expansion.
Yeah, that's a lot. And obviously technology is critical to all that. It's been a great conversation, Amy. To wrap up, I want to kind of spin it forward a little bit. And how are you at Everrise? How are you going to help your clients and those in digital media space kind of evolve and innovate to stay competitive in such an environment that we have?
Yeah, we love this space, right? Innovation is part of our core culture. And so smarter content management is definitely going to be at the forefront for us, and more immersive experiences. So more interaction with the streaming that we see, so that it's as people are watching events, they can have purchases, they can understand what those products are, they can find out what, more information on it. Imagine viewing, all of these home lifestyle channels and actually be able to say, that's the flooring that I want in my home, and being able to click on a live stream and having the product pop up, a consultant be able to talk to you, and then just be able to purchase based on what you've been watching. It's those kind of immersive experiences that are going to continue leading how technology and product innovation move forward in our in our ecospace.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's a great way to wrap up today. Amy McDonald from Everrise. Really appreciate your time today and your perspectives.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
If you miss a live session, you can go back at any time to watch on demand. Go to Watch Replays and click on the session that you want to view. Have you created your own event agenda in SwapCard? Visit the Agenda and Watch Replay tabs to add sessions that interest you to your own event. You can go back to My Event to revisit any bookmarked sessions, sponsors, and items. We want to make sure that you're connecting with our industry-leading sponsors. You can interact with them by visiting the Booths and the Sponsor tab. You can also bookmark sponsors or add items to your event to view later. Sponsors have uploaded extra materials for attendees. Make sure to visit sponsors that interest you to chat with one of their team members or save documents for later. We have dedicated meeting slots set up for break times between sessions. Continue the discussion by requesting meetings from others in the SwapCard platform. Schedule a meeting with another attendee or a sponsor by visiting their page. The panelists and speakers will be addressing your questions live during the stream. During the stream, use the question tab to ask your questions early in the presentation. Go to the poll tab to answer polls that will be discussed during the live stream. If you need help navigating SwapCard, please reach out to our team by mentioning @Parks Associates in the chat box or by contacting one of our team members via our company page. Welcome to the 4th annual Future of Video OTT, Pay TV, and Digital Media, a virtual series taking place across 2021. Consumers and their entertainment choices are the key drivers in the entertainment industry. As more video entertainment options become available, bringing more freedom of choice, consumer preferences will determine their usage patterns and the size and content of their portfolios. Market conditions have also changed the nature of competition in video services. Consumers are willing to carry multiple video accounts to get the content they want, so in many instances, a service is desired based on how it complements other services in the market. Thank you for attending Future of Video, OTT, Pay TV, and Digital Media.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Parks Associates Future Video session, the Age of Video Aggregation, sponsored by Comcast Technology Solutions. We'd like to first take a moment to thank our sponsors that made today's session in the Future Video series possible. Our research partners, Everise and Symphony Media AI, our session sponsors, Comcast Technology Solutions and Delta Trade, our gold sponsors, Bright Cove and Future Today, our silver sponsor, BitMovin, and thank you to Metrological for sponsoring our break. Thank you all for your support of Future Video. We want to also thank our media and industry association supporters who make today possible as well. And that includes our platinum supporters, CEDIA, Connected Design, Dealer Scope, SCTE, the Monitoring Association, and the Z-Wave Alliance. Thank you also to our supporters, the Asia Video Industry Association, the Home Grid Forum, and the Media Institute. Thank you all for supporting Future Video. To give you a brief overview of how today is going to go, I'll kick things off with my insight and view of the market. I'll then have our visionary fireside chat with Bart Spriester of Comcast Technology Solutions. Then Parks Associates Vice President of Research Jennifer Kent will conduct our executive Q&A portion with Viewed's Chief Product Officer Sasha Pruder. And from there, we'll get into a great panel discussion with Rob Caruso from Google, Brian Jentz of 3SS, Michael Lance of Excedo, Scott Maddox of Xperi, and Stefan Von Engen of Zumo. And at the end of the panel, we'll have an audience Q&A session with the speakers, and then we'll invite the speakers and our audience to participate together in our Zoom rooms networking discussion on the role on the advantages and disadvantages of aggregation for video services. So before we begin, I'd like to encourage our audience to submit your Q&A questions at any time during today's program through Swapcard. And to briefly preview what we have in store to close out the year for the Future Video discussion series, tomorrow we have lined up two sessions, the first on video engagement strategies, sponsored by Delta Trade, and the second on OTT bundling partnerships. And so we hope you join us again tomorrow for these two great sessions. And you can also freely go back to watch previous Future Video sessions from this year over a variety of topics pertinent to the video market today. I'd like to kick things off by looking at the state of the market and to lay the background story for today's session of why there's such a need for aggregation and how it's intertwined with the increased amount of choice that we have today. So our discussion panel will then dive further into how best to utilize video aggregation to optimize the viewing experience for consumers and to keep them engaged. But first, let's start by looking at the state of consumer video consumption today and why video aggregation is increasingly crucial. By way of introduction, I'm Paul Erickson. I'm a senior analyst with Parks Associates on our entertainment team, and I can cover the consumer arena from technologies, devices, to services. And so I've been in the technology arena for over 20 years and over 16 as an analyst, and I've covered both the consumer and service provider ends of the video spectrum. And I'm happy to be here today with this panel to talk about a topic I find really interesting because of how crucial it's become for today's crowded video landscape, aggregation. So bringing together all the different sources of content for consumers and doing it well so that they stay engaged, they stay subscribed, and customers, video services, and content providers all benefit in the end. So let's first understand what's happening today and why there's such a need for content aggregation. Today, consumers have fully embraced streaming video, especially after the influence on viewing habits that's occurred over the course of the pandemic. Over 82% of broadband households have at least one OTT video subscription, and that's steady growth since 2018. And now OTT video subscribers have passed traditional pay TV subscribers, and OTT video is now the primary way that US consumers consume their video content. And one big reason why consumers love OTT video is because it opens up an incredible amount of choice with a wide variety of services and content that are now accessible to all of us over that internet connection. And consumers have embraced having the freedom to choose from so many options. And to underscore that point, let's look at the following. Today, consumers are adopting multiple services. The market is crowded with options, and OTT service competition is at all-time highs. So currently in 2021, nearly half of US consumers have 4 or more OTT video subscriptions. And last year was under half that at 22%. So consumers have fully embraced streaming video and are using multiple services to satisfy their appetite. However, there's an inevitable point of consumer fatigue from being subscribed to so many services and really only having a finite amount of time and budget to dedicate to them. So we're seeing that beginning to take effect now, and consumers are getting more selective with what services make the cut, and subscription growth is starting to slow. So the pressure is on in this crowded environment for services to increase their engagement to prevent churn. And the situation today also means that consumers have not just plenty of choice, but the increasingly common problem of an overload of content to choose from. And whether it's within a video services user experience or a device's overall user experience, combating that overload by intelligently aggregating all of that content into just what's relevant to the user is going to be a universal benefit. And more importantly, it will keep users consistently engaged and less likely to break away from the user experience and to go to another service or another device or what have you. So as we all know, the consumption user experience can vary widely depending on exactly what device you're watching on. So let's first get an understanding of what devices and platforms the US is watching streaming video on in order to understand where that aggregated experience will need to be delivered and what it needs to be optimized for. So Parks Associates research found that usage-wise, the three top devices are streaming media players, smart TVs, and set-top boxes. Now, set-top boxes are the most used for service provider video, which isn't very surprising. And streaming media players, not smart TVs, are the top device for consumption overall in terms of hourly usage. They're also the most used for SVOD and AVOD services, and they're the top platform for watching SVOD. Consoles and smartphones are the most used for watching YouTube, Twitch, and other video-focused websites. Smart TVs, for their sake, they're the platform with the most balanced jack-of-all-trades usage of all the top three devices between service provider viewing, SVOD, and AVOD content. So here we can see that there are certain platforms that are distinctly used more for particular types of content than others. And this suggests that optimization of the aggregated video consumption user experience on each might be best done by balancing content aggregation with optimizations for the type of content that consumers prefer to consume most on each device. Now, beyond the type of devices that aggregated experiences need to be delivered on and what types of services to optimize for in each device, let's also look at why aggregating an overwhelming sea of content together into a relevant experience is key to success in this industry. And that's because when it comes to maximizing customer acquisition, engagement, and stickiness, content is the essential factor for success. And our research shows that within the top 5 factors driving OTT subscriptions, 3 out of the top 5 factors involve content. And on the opposite side, not finding the right content or running out of content to watch are 2 of the top 5 reasons for people leaving and churning away from service. And the takeaway is that content is the primary catalyst on both sides of the subscriber journey. And in fact, Disney is budgeting $33 billion for content in 2022, which backs up the fact that content is the lifeblood of this industry. But just having a lot of content is only part of the equation. Matching the right kind of content for the right subscriber is the key to maximizing how irreplaceable that service seems to the consumer in terms of subscribing to and staying with that service. Aggregation done well supplies the consumer with the most relevant content that they want to watch that's available from their collective library of accessible content. Let's look at an additional aspect of that and how aggregation and choice are intertwined. Having choices and access to a variety of content matters to consumers. Aggregation delivers this variety to the benefit of both the service and the consumer. And let's unpack that by looking at how consumers respond to variety. Viewers dedicate an average of 70% of their viewing to services with a broad variety of content. And over 1/3 of viewers dedicate over 3/4 of their time to services with varied content. And our takeaway here is that while in this example we're looking at content variety within a service or bundle, aggregation is instead a content-centric way to make best use of this consumer desire for access to variety. The key here is to deliver choice and variety, but in a way where consumers are not being overwhelmed by it, and they see all of that aggregated content access boil down into what's relevant to them. Business-wise, this is ideal. Making sure all of that content access is presented in a way that keeps consumers watching, engaged, and happy, and doing it to the maximum that the collective library of aggregated content is able to, that results in maximum engagement, retention, churn prevention, and where applicable, return on content investment. And so this is why content aggregation, done well, is so powerful in its ability to benefit both the industry and consumers. And while we've established the importance of delivering content choice and variety in an organized way, I'd like to close with one last reason why aggregation is so important today. Aggregation is a must if for no other reason than its competitive table stakes for devices and applicable services at this point. Consumer expectations are higher today than ever before, thanks to platform providers and UX designers understanding that simplifying content overload is of universal value to consumers. Some kind of aggregated experience is increasingly going to be what people are expecting. So the way to differentiate is increasingly going to be in delivering aggregation, but also done well. And so doing it in a basis that's more perceptive, more relevant, and more efficient is going to result in better execution, which then results in the tangible rewards, of higher sustained engagement of the consumer, and by extension, higher subscriber retention for video services. And our panel will dive a bit more into aggregation best practices and principles during our discussion to come in a few minutes. With that, let's recap the situation briefly. As I mentioned, OTT adoption and competition are at all-time highs, and consumers have the problem of an overload of choice. And consumers' device of choice to watch on varies by the type of OTT service being consumed, and it may provide options to optimize aggregated experiences to the types of services that they prefer to watch on those devices. Content is a crucial factor, and varied content drives higher engagement. Aggregation can deliver the variety that is relevant to the consumer. And consumers now expect some type of aggregation in their experiences, and increasingly it's becoming the norm. Aggregation can still be a differentiator if it's executed well. And so now that I've set the stage with the Parks Associates' view of the video aggregation environment, I'm happy to present for the visionary insight portion of today's program, Bart Spriester, Vice President and General Manager of Content and Streaming Provider Solutions for Comcast Technology Solutions. Bart oversees sales, service, and product management for the business, delivering solutions to hundreds of media and technology companies worldwide. Bart's an industry veteran who formerly served as SVP of Video Products and Solutions for Harmonic prior to joining the Comcast Technology Solutions team. And he also had senior roles at Encompass Digital Solutions and Cisco. Bart earned his MBA at Georgia Tech and is a BS in Electrical and Electronics Engineering from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He's also a Six Sigma Yellow Belt and a graduate of the Executive Management Program from Harvard Business School. Bart, thank you for being with us today. And before we begin, though, I'd like to first take a moment to let our audience know we'll have a brief Q&A in a few minutes with Bart. So please submit any questions you have for him in advance via swap card. With that out of the way, Bart, welcome. And just start off, for those unfamiliar, can you take a moment to explain what Comcast Technology Solutions does and CTS's role in the broader video landscape?
Yeah, happy to, Paul. Thanks for inviting me. I think your insights are spot on, and I'm happy to add on to that a little bit. But Comcast Technology Solutions' mission is to bring Comcast technology to the industry. So what does that mean? That means Comcast spends about $2 billion annually in R&D directed at video tech, ad tech, and connectivity, and various other types of media technology. And we make that available to our customers. So the cool thing about that is that we're constantly innovating, and we're constantly trying to bring new approaches, new technology to the industry to help serve our customers. So my responsibility is, as the GM of the content and streaming provider business, is to focus specifically on bringing the Comcast streaming tech to the global industry. So it's an exciting job for sure, because as your data showed, there's a lot changing.
Excellent. Well, Bart, I think today, we'll be talking about some key trends that you expect to see in 2022. But maybe we should first start by talking about what's happening now in 2021. And COVID has changed the video consumption landscape in a number of different ways. And while pay TV is still a key viewing platform for consumers, the places and ways and use cases by which people are watching, premium high-value video content are more fragmented and fractured than ever. So what's your view on how COVID has changed the dynamics of video consumption?
Materially is the short answer. But look, Paul, I want to mention to you that the Parks Associates report that you had in this space, the video services dashboard, and some of the data you showed, I think it was spot on. So for those that haven't seen it yet, you should definitely go check it out. And it's good, relevant information, and I love the data. But look, we all know that video consumption has been rising across all platforms. And I think when we first entered in COVID, even though sports went basically to zero for quite some time, overall video consumption went up something on the order of 30%, give or take. And in fact, in the year 2 of COVID, unfortunately, we're in a year 2 of COVID, we've seen not quite, but almost those same type of levels. And I think a lot of it is driven exactly what you said. It's the content boom. 10 years ago, we thought they'd never spend any more on content. And now I think as an industry globally, it's something like $220 billion spent on content, with like 100 billion plus is spent just in Hollywood alone, which I think it's amazing. Now, all of that means that, and all of this consumptions mean that high profile global launches of premium D2C video services have increased. We all know that. But interestingly enough, what we see from our data from our customers is that these premium online D2C video services are being brought back into the main TV or the living room, which of course, when we talked about multi-screen 10 years ago, we really downplayed the living room, and we talked about the iPad and the iOS and Android devices. And now when we talk about multi-screen, the living room is back to being kind of and the smart TV to be a first-class kind of citizen. And what that means for us and tech providers in general in the industry is that we need to stay nimble, and we need to deliver video wherever consumers demand it. But here's the complicated part. Of course, we have to do that, but now we have to do it in ways where we provide this content securely to all the rights holders, and to make sure that the aggregators meet all the obligations of the content owners, which it's getting harder and harder to do that.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point, how things have come full circle as far as platforms to concentrate on. We're now more than ever, and maybe the pandemic only exacerbated the trend, where the smart TV now is such a center of consumption and center for data collection and so on. And it's become a vital part of the living room and pretty much every single entertainment strategy that's out there now within the OTT landscape. And I think I'd like to address a trend that you've said sometimes is considered an afterthought, and that's security. And I think for high value content owners and distributors, are there any is there any advice and any kind of positive trends you can highlight when it comes to issues surrounding content security and user security? And I think this is really top of mind now, because everyone is trying to deliver premium content over streaming now, right? So there's no longer the protection of a walled garden and having things, in a closed loop. And so I think for many high value content owners, premium content owners, protecting that content is top of mind. So, what are your thoughts on the topic?
So you've hit on a hot one. In fact, I would say this is a very hot topic. And just yesterday, publicly, the director of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Cyber and Infrastructure Agency discussed this latest vulnerability called Java Log4j. And if you haven't seen about it or haven't read about it, you should. And it's all over the internet. And it's a big vulnerability. And in fact, this director said it's one of the most serious vulnerabilities that she has seen in her career, if not the most serious. I think that's pretty close to the quote. But look, for the industry, we need to take security more seriously, and we need to do it in a holistic way. You mentioned DRM and access control. That's something that we've been doing, pretty well for many, many years, maybe even 30 or 40 years. And then probably over the last few years, customer data and privacy and security, like the laws in the European Union for GDPR and some of the states in the US like California and others, that made us, retrench and put some, walled gardens and some firewalls around all the customer data. But I think today the trend is even more relevant today. And just look at this Log4j issue that's hot in the press right now. What we need to do is we need to up our game on what we call interaction security. So as you send information to and from, it's no longer just good enough to be a secure HTTP or anything. It has to be locked down with some really high-end encryption like TLS 1.2 and other standards. And that's something that the industry has to move on. And I think, look, it's imperative that security in our products and services not be bolted on at the end. make a product and then put a firewall and call it done. That's not good enough. So we need to make it part of the organizational DNA security. Everything from a line of code to the infrastructure and the end-to-end services need to be covered. And this is what we've been focusing on a lot at Comcast Technology Solutions with our partner, or with our main company, Comcast, is on a holistic security approach. And I'll tell you, that's what our customers are really asking for. And a lot of times you think, oh, you just moved to a public cloud and it solves the problem. And in fact, that's not the case, because the public cloud providers are great, all of them, but they only provide security up to a certain level on the stack. So it's up to the rest of the companies involved in the ecosystem to ensure security at the application layer and at the container layer and at the account levels. And what we say in our development timelines, the engineers always have their schedule. We say we need to move the security thinking and the security features to the left of the schedule. So early on in the schedule, and not be this afterthought. And that's something that's super critical that everyone in the industry and that we're focused on for sure to do. So security is a super hot topic right now.
Yeah, and I think as the industry gets better and better at using OTT to deliver everything that usually was it was advantageous to do over broadcast, such as live, especially live events and live sports. It's very important to think about security from the beginning, right? To be preempted, because there's going to be people out there, parties out there that are going to do what they can to pirate the content. So I think it's tantamount importance, because, as I mentioned before, now there's such a focus on delivering over the top, without the protection of that walled garden. So,
and to the main TV, to the main broadcast viewing TV in your house, right? Which it upped the game.
Yes. So I think it's very top of mind for everyone as the industry moves to a full business model that embraces OTT. And I think more than ever, along those lines, people want access to premium content. And the companies in the business of supplying that premium content, they want to ensure that essentially their rights and their business models are enforced. And metadata is a key to delivering better, better aggregation, which we're going to talk about in depth here in a little bit. But it's also a key enabler for this protection of business models and rights. And are there trends in management of this metadata that you see for 2022 that can help keep both consumers' interests and business interests aligned?
No, absolutely great question. In fact, I will tell you that everyone in the industry knows the value of metadata, but I think for me, kind of metadata workflows are arguably the most important workflow, because that's where all the business value of the content is unlocked. So we need full and rich metadata. And then we need to be able to process intelligently through automated workflows, to recommend recommendation engines and other things to take advantage of metadata. We all need that. The good news, I guess, for our industry is, and for consumers in the end, is we have one of the most useful real-time metadata standards already developed. And that's the SCTE 224 or SCTE 224. And it's an intelligent metadata layer that runs as a sidecar to the video and enables decision making in real time on all this data, on all the rights data. So it's a great tool for all of us to leverage. And when we talk about that, it's a standard that can be used across several of the content providers and frankly all around the industry. In fact, we have a customer that we publicly announced in Fox that uses this SCTE 224 across hundreds of channels, 10 distribution partners or 10 or more distribution partners, and they're all able to communicate the rights and metadata information on a program level basis, whether it's a certain content that need to be blacked out or switched or other elements of the stream that need to be changed. In fact, we have a great case study on our website that's worth reading if you're ever interested to know the bits and bytes of how this happens. But the promise of the SCTE 224 can be used now to enable intelligent ad decisioning, which is another important part of metadata, for targeting households on a TV advertising level. And after how the system works is after the ad decision engine, the ADIs make a call for an ad, the SCUDdy or the SET 224 can enforce all the rules and restrictions. This is going to be massive for our industry. This is finally unlocking the potential that we talk about in advanced advertising that we've probably talked about for 5 years. But we're at the point where we have all the technology building blocks to do this. And of course, this will enable the content providers and the operators to deliver ads at a premium rate compared to traditional ads, and to do it in a way where the consumers will probably enjoy it better because it will be better linked into whatever their experience is. So if you see the the car chase on TV and it's a BMW car, and then we go to a commercial, we can immediately place a BMW car ad commercial in there, that type of thing. So rich layers of metadata will be at the heart of everything we're doing going forward. What you're also going to see is AI take a material role in 2022, and we expect that to be linked in with this metadata standards, the SET standards, and to really enrich the end consumer experience. So it's going to be an exciting time.
Well, let's expand on that. I'm glad you mentioned that. So if we talk about AI, and it's talked about a lot across all the consumer landscape. And certainly we hear about it all the time as far as its ability to perhaps change the video industry, and especially when we're talking about subjects like aggregation, metadata, understanding more about the consumer. And do you think 2022, as you mentioned, is it really going to be a year that we see AI take a principal role in the premium video space? And if so, in what ways?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's been talked about for quite some time. It's been used, I would say, in proof of concepts for a couple of years now, on and off. But I really think 2022 is going to be a breakthrough year for the application of AI in our premium video, and I would say at scale, because there's a lot of operators that play around with it, but I think it's going to be at scale. And there's lots and lots of potential applications for AI in video. And there's a few that I would say are timely and hot and will probably be used in 2022. One is the automatic generation of rich metadata in the video content. We talked about how important metadata is. I think everyone understands that. The problem is generating so much metadata is usually a manual process, or nearly manual. So I think if we can use AI to remove a lot of the time it takes to put all this massive amount of rich metadata into and around our video, that will be a huge cost saver and an experience enricher for the end consumer. And I think that's going to happen. The other thing I would say is AI can be used to generate new content, particularly around automated playlists, maybe clips or highlights, and they can be leveraged for additional monetization. I know that for some of my favorite sports teams, watching an American football game is a 3-hour event, and we all know that clipping it down to a short period of time, to all the key plays is 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Man, I love that as a time saver. But I also think AI could be used to help improve the ad efficiency. What I was talking about earlier about automatically detecting ad breaks and informing the ad decisions by even leveraging, richer metadata. So even if we don't get to the full monetization method of targeted advertising, I think just identifying ad breaks, flagging that, and leveraging that. So I think what you're going to see in 2022 is all major media and entertainment companies beginning to lean in really hard on AI and actually deploying a lot of that functionality. And I think you're going to see it at scale throughout 2022. So it's going to be an exciting year. So watch that space.
Well, we'll definitely be watching. I'm waiting to see all of that tangible impact from AI take place. But I think it's going to be interesting to watch, especially as we see it make more perceptive decisions for stakeholders in the industry on an automated basis, and perhaps drawing forth efficiencies that weren't possible before, right? I mean, there was promise there.
Paul, you're right on. So it's kind of a bit of the holy grail, because it's a cost savings tool. It's an experience enriching tool for the end consumer. And so when you tie up both of those, I mean, it's a winner.
Yeah, I agree. And with all of this innovation, well, let's kind of turn the conversation back to where everything began with live or appointment television, right? I mean, you made it a point to watch your show that comes on at 9:30 every night, rather than it coming to you on demand, right?
Mhm.
And so the old-fashioned way of watching TV. Now, how is that going to change going forward in 2022? And I know that CTS is involved in one of the most audacious, most famous, most challenging live events to try and to cover, and most especially to transfer to an OTT available basis, right? The Olympics. And so, can you start by telling us a little bit about your role there, or CTS's role there, and whether you see trends there from the Olympics that are applicable to the industry in 2022?
Yeah. So I think we all know that live TV is still special for events, sporting and what have you. There's an interesting stat. I think it was in Variety that the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, I believe it was according to Nielsen, saw more than 25 million live same-day viewers, which outperformed the Grammys, the Oscars, and the Emmys. So, live events are still important. And in fact, Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is always kind of a nice, happy event. So it's kind of good to see this sometimes in our crazy world that we live in, that big, large, I don't know, family or nice events can draw so many viewers, for sure. I'll tell you, our experience with the Olympics is the Tokyo Olympics is second to none. It's amazing to be a part of it, and we're happy that the ecosystem of Comcast companies takes such a large role. And what we did for there is we provided about almost 3,000 hours of SVOD content. That some of it was UHD or HD, or even had some advanced audio, Dolby Audio function on it. But we provided this content to the NBC Universal platforms, including NBC Sports, NBCOlympics.com, Peacock, and other affiliates across all their websites and set tops and apps. So it's really impressive and kind of a big event that just shows you the power still of live sports and live event. And what we were able to do is we provided a centralized ingest for all the video assets. We worked all the metadata workflow and the managed and distributed this content, out to these over 500 different endpoints. And we did it, of course, with all our metadata. And if it was on a Comcast system, it went across our CDN. And then maybe even more importantly, and more than ever, we had the accessibility and the closed captioning and all the enhancements that we pushed through on all the video, like I said, more than we've ever had before. So anyway, we're super proud of all the work that we've done there. And I think, I think for live video and live events, I mean, we as Comcast Technology Solutions expect to see, the trend of all of this continuing. I don't think anybody says that appointment TV is dead. It definitely shifted. And, we're working on, from a streaming point of view, to enhance it even more with improved latency, improved video quality. And I think a lot of people in the industry are, because that's where our customers are pushing us. So when you add that all together, appointment TV is still good and it's still great. And there's been some, impressive examples like the Tokyo Olympics that just really need to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think the Olympics are always a great test, bellwether, crucible. You pick the adjective for the state of OTT every single year, right?
Every single year, chart goes up on streaming, and it's pretty cool, right? If you can watch whatever event is your favorite event, and you can watch it when it's not sliced and diced for just a primetime kind of show, which they're wonderful shows. But if I'm a big fan of, I don't know, curling, I want to watch all the curling action. You can do that in a streaming platform. So it's impressive. Good consumer experience.
It is. So I think the last thing I want to cover here, which actually relates to the rest of our panel today, or at least more closely to it, which is that aggregation, right? So it's the topic of the day. It's the topic of this panel. And it's a trend that we're increasingly seeing on user experiences on devices now. I mean, as a good example, Google TV, right? You know, how they aggregate things together in the user experience. And that's just an example of the trend and what's being done on devices. And so we see this trend, this desire to go towards super aggregation of the experience, where you're bringing a personalized experience to consumers that's content first, like regardless of the content source, like what service you're getting it from, where you're pushing the content first, personalized first to the consumer, regardless of where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. So we're likely to touch on this topic in the panel, but given your experience and CTS's perspective, of course, can you share some insight on this trend and any implications it might have for the industry, whether that's metadata or that's controlling the user experience? What does it really mean for the industry in the end?
So I loved your data that you showed earlier, because it's all true. You know, we all know content is king, but if you peel that back a couple layers, you say that content has to be on the right device for the right person. You have to be able to target it efficiently. And then you have to be able to find an easy way for that particular person to sort and search the content. And I would say we see our customers doing the same thing. You know, many of our operator customers believe in the strategy, the aggregator of aggregators. And I think the more successful companies will be able to do that well. So when you do a search of content and you're an aggregator of aggregators, your search algorithms search across all your platforms. And that is super key, because that is what satisfies your criteria after content is king, getting the right content to the right person, and especially depending on device. And I think that is a winning strategy. And that's what we've seen with a lot of our top customers. So I think you hit on a very, very important and good topic. And it ties back to, frankly, everything we talked about today, which is, you know, the metadata and making sure we have the right AI tools to make that as rich as possible. But look, that's how to get the end consumer the best experience. And one of the things that I always like talking about, which is true, and I think you saw that in some of your data too, is that, and I've said this many times, but it's so great. For our industry, the good news is for all of us is that TV viewing continues to be the #1 hobby in the world, in almost every country. And I think if we do some of these things we talked about today, and I'm sure some of the great things your panelists are going to talk about later, we'll be able to continue that trend for the industry.
Yeah, and you touch on an interesting point. You know, the nature of what's being viewed on that TV may vary, right, depending on region and country and what the national pastime is, for example. But it's a universal method of entertainment, right? Wherever people have access to. Maybe they don't even have good, solid broadband access to be able to receive anything OTT, but they're still finding a way to receive terrestrial. So it is a universal avenue of entertainment. And I think you also touched on something else, which perhaps I didn't fully realize before, is how intertwined metadata is across several different areas of the industry. So it's not just personalization. It's not just ad targeting. It's also rights protection and a number of different aspects where metadata is crucial. And I think, maybe in a future video session, we can dive a bit more into how to really create better and better metadata. And certainly AI is going to play a role in that, in discovering kind of patterns that weren't there before, and really delving deeper into understanding the consumer. So I'm excited for a lot of these technology developments to come. And if you can do us the favor, we have got one audience Q&A question here that we have time to cover, just enough to cover. And the question is, what is the role of interactivity in the future? Are you working on different projects that are incorporating various partnerships and more integration with brands, celebrities, and other aspects of adding to the experience?
Absolutely. We provide a lot of the infrastructure and the plumbing on the backside, but I can tell you a lot of our customers are working on advanced interaction concepts. And I think anything we can do as an industry to engage folks more in this content, because remember, this $220 billion or so that's being spent on content across the world annually, by the way, all of that needs to get a return on investment. So, and that number will continue to increase. I think you mentioned some of the Disney numbers, and I think year over year, they're going to increase some of their spend by like 30%, and they're already one of the largest. And I think we have to get that return on investment. And the only way to do that is advanced tools to interact with the content. And we've seen, and I don't want to give any specific customer names, but we've seen some very, very cool technology that is in prototype and in beta that will engage folks more and do it in ways that are, I would say, non-traditional. And I can't wait, because I'm a consumer of all this great content too.
I can't wait as well. Well, Bart, that's all the time we have for today. But again, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a lot of that great insight. And we hope you can join us for future video sessions, but also maybe in our networking session later today.
I love it. Thanks, Paul.
And we're about to be joined by Parks Associates Vice President of Research, Jennifer Kent, for Executive Spotlight with Sasha Pruder of Viewed. And we'll be back with Jennifer's conversation with Sasha in just a few moments.
Parks Associates OTT Video Market Tracker Service includes a thorough analysis of market trends and profiles of nearly 300 OTT video service providers in the US and Canada. Subscription to the tracker includes comprehensive tracking of OTT video services like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, Disney+, HBO Max, and more. Our analysts update deliverables throughout the year, including a monthly update and quarterly subscriber and user estimates, documenting service features, key service differentiators, pricing and business models, updates on existing players, and profiles and industry implications for new services. The OTT Video Market Tracker features a new way to blend company profiles with industry research data and analysis of competing player strengths and weaknesses in the space. To subscribe or request more information, please contact us at sales@parksassociates.com.
Did you know that 69% of US broadband households have used at least one type of online streaming service in the past 30 days? Download our new webinar, How to Build a Winning OTT Strategy, Balancing Content and Platforms, in collaboration with BitMovin. Opportunities and challenges fill today's landscape for streaming video services. A greater number of consumers than ever before are consuming OTT video, with a corresponding jump in variables that impact the user experience. Different types of content consumed on different types of devices by different customer segments. In this competitive market, delivering a streaming video service to market quickly with the high quality of experience consumers now expect is crucial. The threat of churn is ever present. Switching services is easy and retention is difficult. This webinar explores the challenges of meeting this diverse mix of expectations across varying content types, audiences, and customer segments, and best practices in addressing them. Join us as we discuss the multiple variables across content types, platform preferences, and consumption patterns that OTT providers must consider. Download the webinar now to receive insights on how companies can accomplish their target time to market while still addressing all of these factors.
Okay, wonderful. So very happy to continue this conversation on the age of video aggregation and OTT with Sasha Pruder, who is the Chief Product Officer of Viewed. Hi, Sasha. Welcome.
Hi, Jennifer. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Before we really dive into our conversation, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Viewed and about your role there?
Yeah, Viewed has been around the industry for quite a while. A lot of people might still know Viewed by the very old name Opera TV. So Viewed came out as a spin-off out of Opera TV. And we've been in the OTT streaming world really since the beginning. So since the inception in the living room, we have worked with partners like Philips to build the first net TV, so really the first smart TV back in, I think, 2007. We worked with Nintendo to enable things like YouTube on the Nintendo Wii back in the day, which was, I think, the first kind of living room YouTube streamer. So we've been around in the ever-growing OTT business, video streaming business for quite a while, and have enabled over the years, more and more of our partners in the smart TV space. So smart TV manufacturers like Sony, Philips, Hisense, Vestel, and so on, but also pay TV operator, as they have added on to OTT services to their offering over the years. And this at a global scale. So I think one of the things that makes us a little bit unique is we have smart TV manufacturers as customers, we have pay TV operators as customers, we work with OTT content providers, traditional content providers, and that all over the world. So that gives us a very, I think, unique view into how entertainment and media distribution in the TV world is developing in different parts of the world, because it's quite different. I think we might talk about that a little bit later. And also how different segments are actually developing. My role as a chief product officer is really expanding our product portfolio and really planning what the next few years have what the market needs, what our customers need, and developing products for that. So we have expanded our product portfolio quite a bit, going from, like, back in the old days, basically providing the first browser for TV and the first media player to play back OTT content. But these days we're developing a lot more end-to-end solutions, white labeled smart TV experiences, operator TV solutions, pay TV solutions across different operating systems. So it's quite wide ranging, and it's a fun business to be in, but won't bore you more about that.
Well, I love that long experience that Viewed and Before It Opera TV has in the industry, because you really got to see the transition from a very aggregated market where, you know, you've got the traditional pay TV play to the incredible fragmentation of the OTT landscape, not only from distinct video services, but then across an incredible variety of devices. And then potentially, you know, moving back now into re-aggregation and rebundling of services. So from your perspective in the industry, how would you characterize kind of this moment in the OTT space?
Yeah, and I think this is clear, like the re-aggregation of content is clearly a trend we are seeing, and it's not very new. I think the forms it takes and kind of the how it's exposed to the user is changing a little bit. But I mean, it started with simple things like App Store, or adding additional services back in the day into a traditional EPG program guide. And then the App Stores came along, and then kind of favorite apps that were placed on the home screen. And now we are seeing more and more, actually, with all these different options to get video content from, consumers are also somewhat overloaded. So there is obviously an opportunity to aggregate video from different sources that might be useful or that might be interesting to the user in one place. And what we see, like, a little bit changing is how it's being exposed to consumers. While a few years ago it was kind of exposed via different apps, kind of every type of content was a different app, we now see more and more content that would be harder to discover actually being exposed more on home screens, or of a TV, or on search, on kind of like recommendations custom tailored to the user. So bringing it more towards the user instead of the user having to search it. And there are there are multiple kind of sources for who is actually doing the aggregation. There are some content owners, content providers who do a very good job in actually aggregating the content from their various different repositories of whatever they have in their catalog in better ways, and expose it to the user in a more custom tailored way. There are obviously platforms and smart TV platforms that that kind of try to use their home screen real estate to aggregate content from different sources and present it to the user. And then there is also, which is I think also an interesting development over the last few years, there are more and more also the pay TV operators, which traditionally anyway have to some degree aggregated content from different studios into channels, into VOD libraries and so on. And now they are basically adding OTT to that mix. So this is an interesting dynamic as well, because in certain regions, the pay TV operator is a well-trusted source of content, and is kind of like one source of content. It's one billing relationship I might trust. And that might, for a lot of consumers, that might be easier than having a lot of different contracts, for example. So we see very different styles of video aggregation, and depending on which part of the world, some are more popular than others.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of teas out there. So when we think of, well, really, if you put yourself in a kind of a video services space, right? First, and you're thinking about, going direct to consumer, right? And the benefits that come with going direct to consumer from a video services standpoint. But then you see all these aggregation platforms and the opportunity to reach larger scale, right? Have better distribution. How do services evaluate, which aggregation platforms to work with? How do they prioritize?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there are different answers depending on what kind of stage a content service provider is in their level of growth, in their in their reach in a certain region or with a certain customer segment. So I think in general, whatever platform will give a content service provider, no matter if that's a standalone OTT service, if that's fast, free ad-supported channels, if that's AVOD, if that's subscription VOD, for all of them, reach is important, right? So which platform actually gives me most of my of potential customers, and then will help me grow the most, grow me especially in the customer segment I'm trying to target. So high ARPU customers where I can monetize in the best way possible. So this is clearly a driver. But at a certain point, there is also strategy plays a role as well. So looking at, for example, how if we see some skirmish between platform owners and content providers, right? So looking at the recent just resolved dispute that Roku and YouTube had. So if suddenly now a platform provider, like in this case Roku, has a disagreement with a major content provider for that platform, that might actually not only monetization be the dispute here, there might also be strategic reasons, right? And about placement, about search results, and more popular services actually demanding more from the platform, or the other way around, a successful platform demanding more from the service provider. Things like exposing metadata and these kind of things. And so these kind of power struggles, I think, make it difficult both for example, TV manufacturers who have to decide what kind of platform am I choosing or which kind of platform am I building, as well as for the consumer, because for the consumer it's really difficult. I bought this TV with this platform because I like it, or because I like the hardware, because I like the panel. But suddenly, because of some fight I have nothing to do with, my favorite content that I bought this TV for to watch it is not available anymore. So I think this platform and content provider interaction will become very interesting, or is already interesting and will become interesting. And I think it's a key, it's one of the key things to look out in this space, both from a consumer perspective, but also from a content provider perspective. I don't want to skip. There's obviously the whole other world of self-produced content that is going to platforms like YouTube. which is basically a whole different world of distributing content and content providers. But that's somewhat of a separate topic.
No, that's fine. Actually, happy to go there. So, from Vute's perspective, are you serving clients and helping build, experiences for that, whether it be true kind of user-generated content or maybe the prosumer type content, right? That maybe are shut out of the traditional distribution platforms, but maybe aggregated into some other platforms. Is there something you want to share there?
Yeah, it's like we had we have a pretty good insight because we kind of provide to all of these worlds. So we have a platform where for smaller content providers who can't afford to build their own infrastructure around distributing streams, building TV apps for different platforms and so on, we have a very easy system to basically bring in video content. It's kind of like a very easy way for them to create the app and distribute them to lots of manufacturers. So this is the way of kind of helping the smaller content providers. On the platform side, we are working with we have lots of customers where we provide software modules, for example, for Android TV or for RDK or for Linux systems or for Fire TV. And so we actually bring building blocks to enable certain functionality, like hybrid TV that has to apply to certain regulatory requirements in different parts of the world, to these kind of platforms. But we also, because there are more and more TV manufacturers, and we see this especially in the last 2 years, TV manufacturers who think more about the control, that they want to actually have more control of the platform, to actually not get involved into some of these power struggles between third-party, bigger platform providers and content providers. So we see more and more TV OEMs actually wanting to provide their own end-to-end TV experience, smart TV system. And we provide an end-to-end, completely white label solution for this with cloud management possibilities. So manufacturers can manage promotions, get analytics and all these kind of things, control updates, but it is a completely custom tailored experience to them. And it is not an experience you would find then on a dozen other manufacturers. And so having products for each of those markets gives us a pretty good insight there. And we think each of these kind of approaches has its merit. And we try to serve all of those customers, because in the end, it's our customer has to decide what's the right strategy for them, and we try to provide the right tools for them.
Yeah, I think the smart TV, the rise of the smart TV is one of the top streaming platform, right? Our data shows that the smart TV is the most common platform for viewing OTT streaming services now, that just overtook streaming media players. And so smart TV manufacturers are certainly in a position where they have to decide whether or not to build their own or go with an available platform and become a Roku OS or an Android TV, right? Roku TV type operating system. But then, are they giving up? What are they giving up? And the revenue opportunities they might be giving up by not going with their own platform. So how do you see TV manufacturers kind of working through those strategy questions?
That's a loaded question in the industry right now, I guess. So it would be good to have a panel with some TV manufacturers here. I think what we see with most TV manufacturers is that a lot of them drive a multi-platform strategy, right? So for certain markets or for certain customer segments, they might actually take one of the some of the solutions offered in the market, like an Android TV, like a Fire TV edition, a Roku TV, something like this. And for other segments, they, for example, have an in-house development, or they actually mix. They have multiple. They pick multiple pieces for and keep them to have an option A, B, and C, and see which performs better. I do think if you look at the performers in the last few years who have performed really well also in monetizing these devices after they're shipped, I think looking at Vizio, for example, is interesting, right? They developed a solution in-house. They are very successful with that in the North American market, and they are very successful in monetizing users. And I think they've seen very early that controlling the experience, controlling what they offer the user, controlling the aggregation, controlling the analytics is key if they actually want to successfully monetize the device. And I think looking at other data that big platform providers are exposing, it's very clear that looking, for example, at Roku's growth, that there is certainly a merit in controlling the experience end to end. And so I do think we see a growth in general in the market. If you look at TV manufacturers, a growing opinion and also growing volume of model lines that are actually driven by in-house developments, either already or in the near future, because the control of these aspects is, I think, key for survival in the long run.
Well, so one thing I'd love to get your perspective on, because I know that Viewed has a lot of work, across the globe in all sorts of different markets, is if you could share some perspective on how maybe this aggregation story is playing out differently in different locations, right? We've talked a lot about the US today, but certainly, in different and Europe's not all the same, right? Different European markets have different, even traditional historical legacy models that worked really well in the pay TV era for them. And there's regulations that really shape these markets. So what can you share, on how that aggregation story is playing out?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because as you said, so I'm based in Europe, right? And so we have lots of customers in Europe as well. But you can't even address the European TV market as one. So every country has its own unique requirements, regulatory requirements, and also just consumer behavior, ignoring technical requirements and things like this, just because it has historically grown that way. If you look into the UK, actually, the content the broadcasters have actually organized themselves to harmonize content aggregation of the different public broadcasters in the UK and provide basically a joint interface towards smart TV manufacturers. And so, as a smart TV manufacturer, if you want access to the most popular like catch-up content or some of the most popular catch-up content in the UK, where the public broadcasters are still a major source of content and content producer and provider, like BBC, ITV, and so on, you basically have to integrate with those systems, right? It's not a regulatory requirement, but if you want that digital content that all the consumers in the UK want, you better integrate with it. In other markets, in Europe, like there are very popular local players who, for example, provide catch-up archives, on-demand archives of their shows and the content they produce via an HBB TV app. That's the same on every TV device, so a hybrid TV standard. Similar now in the US, ATSC3 coming out, so this is kind of a similar concept. We'll see if the same concept works there. If you go to Latin America or APAC, there are certain regions where, for example, pay TV operators are the most popular content provider and also, depending on the region, content producer, and they are by default kind of the aggregator. So their smart TV manufacturers try to integrate or try to have agreements with those pay TV operators. In that light, for example, announcements like pay TV operators producing their own smart TV, like a thing like Sky did with Sky Glass in the UK, and Comcast is getting a little bit into with X-Class in the US, are interesting developments because you clearly see where the pay TV operator is developing towards becoming a super aggregator across different types of content. And this is also one of the reasons why we have this operator TV program where we help smaller operators specifically kind of getting into the smart TV, not just as an app, but transforming the whole experience. And so you can see, depending on the country, on the region, there are so many differences in technology, in user behavior, in available content. It's not that Netflix is the #1 everywhere, right? Or regional content plays a big role in a lot of countries. English-speaking content is not the only content that is super popular in a lot of countries. But if you currently look at popular AVOD and monetizable AVOD content, it's mostly English speaking. So I think there's still a lot of dynamic we will see over the next few years in terms of content distribution, the aggregation of that content, specifically outside of North America, which is a few steps ahead, I think.
Yeah, that's really great perspective. You touched on the role of the MSP, the pay TV operator, right? And the idea that they could become super aggregators, which I think is a really interesting topic. We've had a lot of, some service providers that have obviously seen their traditional pay TV numbers decline and consider or, really pull back to just being a broadband provider and looking at the profits that just come with broadband, and then figuring out other ways to make their services sticky and create new bundles that really don't include video services, or at least not traditional pay TV. And then you have others like Comcast, like you mentioned, going into maybe leading the other way. So I'm interested, since you do serve a lot of MSPs and set-top box manufacturers, what you think the real opportunity is here for MSPs to again become that kind of super aggregator. Consumers still think of them that way, right? If I'm dealing with a very fragmented ecosystem and trying hard to find the content that I want and having difficulty with that, right? Does working again with a MSP type provider, look pretty attractive?
Yeah, absolutely, and we see that that there are multiple reasons why operators in a lot of regions have an interesting position or a good position to actually transform themselves and actually and still serve their subscribers, maybe with a different kind of offering. It's things about like the billing relationship, right? It's things about most customers anyway actually use them as the ISP anyway. They're anyway in the house. They anyway have that kind of footprint in the home with a broadband gateway or something like that. And we also shouldn't forget a lot of these pay TV operators have actually the relationships with the studios, right? They have the relationships with a lot of the OTT service providers. And honestly, if I look at here locally in Switzerland, like my pay TV operator here offering me, for example, like my Netflix subscription in the same kind of subscription I have with them anyway, Disney Plus and so on, but everything on one bill, and I can select or deselect everything. I can search through one interface through all my live TV content and the Netflix content and the Disney Plus content and whatever other OTT content they're offering. It's actually a pretty good integration, right? And so it is, plus all the regional content, which a lot of consumers just want, right? It is not only the big global content, but it is a lot of regional interest they have as well, sports, news, and so on. And so I do think pay TV operators are in an interesting spot to serve that if they actually reinvent themselves. And in a lot of regions, we see that happening. What we see, the interest for them now actually providing a smart TV experience, not just being an app, right? But actually transforming the smart TV experience to how consumers are used to it from a set-top box perspective. That is actually something we see a lot of interest, and we have a lot of discussions right now with customers and partners.
So I think that reinvention word is the key, right? More difficult to do than to say. So we have just a few minutes left. I'd love to get your thoughts on, Park Associates data shows that I think most OTT subscribers at this point use 4 or more OTT services, and that growth seems to continue to grow and grow the average number of services that consumers are using. A couple of years down the road, 3 years down the road, what do you think that happens with this aggregation trend? Do we do we have more than ever? We have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or we actually maybe just have, you know, 1 or 2 services that we subscribe to, and there are super aggregators, and we access the content that we want.
I do think it depends a little bit on the format and how also content providers are kind of willing to cooperate and open up. I don't think that consumers will accept the current siloed experiences that are every app I'm opening, I have to search for, like, I have a different search function, and the navigation is different, and different things are on different parts of the screen, and I have a different credit card on that app versus my broadband bill. I don't think that kind of very fragmented experience will be accepted. I do think if there is either cooperation between competing parties for certain standards, things like authentication, things, the platforms come back in here to provide functions like billing management, right? If I have easier ways in one consistent way to enable, disable these kind of things. And I'm sure your panelists in the next session actually might have some ideas there. I think Rob is on the panel, so I'm sure he has ideas on that. But I do think these are interesting areas where, if content providers actually work with each other, or if they accept offerings and solutions from the platform providers to manage this, and this is obviously a very strategic, difficult question. Do I hand over the key to my subscriber to a platform? It's the same as with metadata. I think the next battleground will be billing and authentication, potentially. But I do think if these things get solved in the sense that consumers can benefit from it, then I do think it might be fine with 6, 7 different services, and you might switch them somewhat frequently, depending on what time of year or mood you're in.
Well, I think that's really great. We're probably in for a couple more years of battles and fragmentation and navigational woes, but excited to see where this aggregation goes, and what people decide to negotiate on and give up, to find mutual value. Sasha, thank you so much, and what a great setup for our panel as well. All of these topics that you're bringing up. Appreciate you and hearing more about Vewd and what you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And next up, we're going to break out into our full panel discussion with industry leaders talking about this age of aggregation and what it means and where it's going. So give us a few minutes and we'll get our panel going.
On behalf of Parks Associates, it's our goal to ensure our event sponsors receive great visibility and benefits from supporting our executive conferences, custom webinars, white papers, and podcasts. By participating in our events and custom marketing activities, companies gain visibility and brand awareness by leveraging our industry knowledge and insights, which have been carefully and strategically curated for over 35 years. Our event sponsorships include customized visibility options to fit your needs and reach our executive level audience focused on the specific areas we study. Parks Associates custom marketing services include a white paper, webinar, or podcast, which can be produced as a separate marketing activity or in conjunction with our event sponsorships. These thoughtfully crafted content projects leverage our consumer and industry data and are highlighted by our marketing and research team for 3 months. Our team promotes these custom projects through a variety of channels and formats, including video, social media, podcasting, blogging, press activities, and more. Throughout the year, we help connect you with the people who matter the most. In 2022, we look forward to offering virtual events in addition to in-person events, providing a great mix of options to participate. Connections is our flagship event, held annually for over 25 years. This conference addresses critical business issues pertaining to the converging connected home ecosystem and crossover opportunities in adjacent markets. Join us virtually all year and in person in May of 2022. Smart Energy Summit, Engaging the Consumer, examines the expanding markets for energy solutions and home controls, as well as their impact on utilities, service providers, retailers, manufacturers, and consumers. We look forward to seeing you virtually year-round as well as in person in February of 2022. Connected Health Summit Consumer Engagement and Innovation features shifts in consumer healthcare with a special focus on the impact of connected devices, mobile health services, and new health reforms. This conference will be held all year virtually and meeting in person in August 2022. Future of Video, OTT, Pay TV, and Digital Media focuses on the changing digital media landscape with sessions examining OTT and streaming video, content delivery and discovery, and strategies for attracting and retaining consumers. We'll see you virtually throughout the year and in person in December 2022. If you're interested in getting involved, please reach out to me today. I would love to talk with you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you again for joining us today, Sasha from Viewed. And I'd like to now move to our panel discussion on simplifying the aggregated content consumption experience and keeping consumers engaged and in the customer fold. So I'm honored to present our group of panelists today. And we're honored to have with us today Rob Caruso from Google, Brian Jentz from 3SS, Michael Lantz from Exito, Scott Maddox from Xperi, and Stefan Von Engen from Xumo. And I'll be moderating today's panel. So welcome, everybody. We're happy to have you here for this discussion. Thank you again for joining us for what should be a terrific topic. And I'd like to encourage first our audience to submit your Q&A questions for the panel through SwapCard as they come up while we're speaking. And then that way they'll be queued up for us to answer immediately after during our Q&A portion. So before we start, we'd like to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves and what they do at each of their companies. So first up, we have Rob Caruso from Google. Rob, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Hi, Paul, and thanks for having me today. Very excited for the panel. My name is Rob Caruso. I am at Google looking after product and user experience for Google TV.
Thank you, Rob. Next up, we've got Brian Jantz from 3SS, aka 3Screen Solutions. Brian, how about you? Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at 3SS?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. I'm Brian Jentz, and I'm VP of Americas for 3SS. 3SS is a TV UX design, build, and support company. We work primarily with pay TV operators, content right owners, and platform providers. We work with 17 operators in projects reaching 25 million users. We're based in Europe, but we work throughout the world. We have a product framework called Controls 3Ready, which has enabled us to deliver 10 operator projects in 2021. This year, we've added 85 people to support the growth that we are seeing, and very excited to talk about how we've been working with pay TV providers to provide aggregated services across all devices, including set-top boxes, mobile phones, and smart TVs.
Thank you, Brian. We're looking forward to that as well. Next up, we've got Michael Lantz from Exito. Michael, can you tell us a bit about what you do in your role as the CEO of Exito?
Thanks, Paul. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Exito. We're a provider of video experience solutions globally. So I'm also based in Europe, and we have been doing this for close to 18 years now. So in this world of sort of interactive OTT applications and services, I believe that we have done it all.
Thank you, Michael. And we have Scott Maddox from Xperi here as well. Scott, welcome. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your role?
Hey, Paul. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Yeah, it's great to be here. So I'm Scott Maddox, VP of Content Strategy and Business Development, really looking after TiVo Plus, which is our ad-supported content network. And TiVo was acquired by Xperi last year, and just interesting to look at Xperi, media tech company. It's been in heart of Silicon Valley since 1990, but really has a strong presence across the entertainment ecosystem, from in-car experiences. Xperi technology is present in about half the cars sold in the United States, to smart TV manufacturers. Xperi has chip technology baked into those platforms, on up into the living room and through the TiVo brand, about 30 million households worldwide with a variety of TiVo branded solutions. TiVo Plus, the content network, is distributed across all of those platforms. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Looking forward to your perspective. And last but not least, we have Stefan von Engen from Xumo. Stefan, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do at Xumo?
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for having me on the panel today for the Future of Video. Happy to be here. My name is Stefan van Engen. I am head of content programming and partnerships and strategy for Xumo, an ad-supported platform. We started around 6 years ago, and about 18 months ago, Xumo sold to Comcast, so we're now part of the Comcast family. But our platform has remained ad-supported, sort of a fast platform, if you will, although we also have VOD, and we continue to grow that side of the aggregated business.
To that perspective as well, Stefan. So thank you again to all of our panelists for joining us today. I'd like to launch first into a broad question on the topic of aggregation. So let's prime the discussion with this one. And I'm going to pitch this one to Stefan and Scott. What are the biggest and most significant forces today that are driving consumers back towards an aggregated experience, despite there being such a drive to get away from that, the pay TV aggregation of old? And as a dimension of this, are there any particular pain points or particular solutions that you're seeing consumers most responsive to? Stefan?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, you heard Sasha talking about it too, and talking about the amount of SVODs people have and the individual apps and individual services. And you often hear people, in the cable, the cord cutting cable landscape where they've cut cable and now all of a sudden they've got too many choices. And I think ultimately that's driving people back to aggregator services where they can get everything in one place, or at least most things in one place with a few add-ons. And I think it's really about ease for the user. And in the case of Xumo, it's really about the free aspect, right? It's free trumps all. So when you can have a free service, and I would say that goes the same for TiVo Plus, for Pluto, Tubi, etc. We're aggregating content under a free moniker, which is ad-supported, but there's very few barriers to that entry. And there's a lot of different channels and people feel like they have choice, but it's all in one place. And the last part of that would be just the ease of that use, right? In the case of FAST, you see a lot of use of the old school remotes, right? Up, down, left, right. Not a whole lot of technology involved there, but very quick to find and discover things.
Thanks, Stefan. I think, Scott, I'd love to hear your perspective on what's driving people back towards an aggregated experience and in any particular aspects of that they're really responding to.
Yeah, no, it's a great question to kind of set up the panel. And, full disclosure, Stefan and I worked pretty closely. Xumo was our launch partner for TiVo Plus, and everything he said is absolutely true, but we have a slightly different perspective, and we've at times identified ourselves as an aggregator of aggregators because we also have additional partners, including the SVOD and other AVOD players. So when I think about this this domain from a consumer perspective, I think it's worth a quick look back, right? The past is prologue, and what I see are sort of two macro forces really driving. These are consumer-driven forces that have gained momentum over the past decade, right? The first is the launch of Netflix, Prime, Hulu about 15 years ago, right around 2007, right? This is really the birth of kind of the OTT space we live in today. In parallel, consumers have always chafed under the kind of the cable model, the walled gardens, and I think those two things have come together and kind of reached this sort of apex today. So consumers really got what they wished for. Consumers have now more options than ever. They're really faced with the paradox of choice, right? Entertainment options abound. We have dozens of services, right? try the buffet. It's this fabulous offering: HBO Max, Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, Pluto, Zumo, Tubi, Paramount, Peacock. The list goes on. Now, it's great on the one hand. From a content perspective, it's never been better. On the other hand, all that has to be kind of managed and navigated. And not only is the content there and sort of the service offerings there, but also, how would you like, there's the chef at the buffet, right? How would you like that prepared? Would you like that as part of your subscription package? Or do you want to pay as you go? Either TVOD, right? I want to watch an old James Bond movie, it's $2.99 without ads, or free with ads, or new theatrical release, premium $20, but in the comfort of your own home. So there's another aggregation here around the level of the services and the offers. Ultimately, right, the battlefield's the coffee table. Which remote does the consumer reach for? Is it the cable remote? Is it the streamer remote? Is it the Samsung TV remote? So this is where the consumer is navigating this really complex environment. I think that's where we are today, and I think we will see consolidation in some of these areas in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I agree, and I think both of you touched on some commonality there when it comes to the ease and convenience for the consumer, right? Despite maybe some of the hoops that they're going to have to jump through to get there, there's a big difference. Well, let me back up. There's a lot being made now about people paying for multiple services, where they're starting to approach what they formerly paid for old school pay TV, right? But I think what's important to note there is that what they're getting, the perceived value, is just much higher, right? Because before they had the feeling of they're being fed an aggregated choice that was filled with things they didn't necessarily want to see. So now, although they may be paying close to the same amount, they're getting a composition of things that they do want to see. So I think that there's a big discrimination there when it comes to that. So people are much more willing to deal with perhaps the higher costs, or they're going up. Those higher costs, as long as they're getting higher value in what they're getting, right? More of that is what they want to see. And I think if we keep it a bit broad and we move to our next question, we kind of look at where there's opportunities today in the market. So any value gap or opportunities in the market today for aggregation to either occur, or for better aggregation, to occur, where aggregation is improved, where are those gaps? And I think I'd like to throw this one to Michael and Brian. Michael, where are there opportunities today in the market for aggregation?
Well, obviously, we're sitting here in this panel because there are plenty of opportunities. I'd like to think about sort of aggregation in the terms of a, let's call it the soft and the hard aggregation, right? The hard aggregation would be when you sort of have common billing systems, and you have that one bill experience. You make sure that the monetization models are aligned, whether they are advertising or subscriptions or anything else. But I'd say that what I'd like to see most improvements on are the soft aggregation side. So the consumer experience. I think one of the most beautiful aspects of aggregation is the improved discoverability. From a consumer perspective, it is really the reason why they would like to have all the services in one place. Sure, there is some convenience in the billing. Sure, there is some aspects of signing up easier to services, but it's all about sort of the day-to-day use, which is how do I find the right content to use? How does someone recommend to me, not only within one service, but across services, what I should watch? I think that's a problem that has not really been solved so far, right? We all see these challenges, and when we're getting recommendations, it seems like they're only the generic top recommendations anyway, right? So I think that solution to that discoverability problem is something that is ripe for any aggregator to take on. That's, to me, would be the most prioritized problem.
Thanks, Michael. And Brian, what's your take on this? Where there are opportunities here, value gaps, or opportunities for improvement in this market?
Yeah, well, first, I think there are a lot of operators that are doing, pretty sophisticated levels of aggregation. Sasha touched on that at the end of his comments as well. One of our customers in Belgium is Proximus, and they rolled out last year an aggregated service, which included their OTT content plus OTT apps, all in a unified experience on an Android TV box. And they are bundling Netflix and Disney Plus in a very deep integration methodology with single sign-on. And they're also enabling for other OTT content the subscriptions to be managed directly on the box. And the user can actually browse through the content library before they make a buy decision. So I think with that as a backdrop, they're also doing something that's pretty unique right now, in that they have rolled out targeted advertising. I think this is a great untapped opportunity for especially pay TV operators. If you look at it, we've talked about this, operators typically have a very deep relationship with customers where they are providing broadband, video, and the billing. So you can combine that with super aggregation, and then they're really in an ideal position to take advantage of targeted advertising. So I think we're now at the point where we're going to start seeing more and more operators start to roll that out and take advantage of that. I think another interesting thing that Proximus is doing is they're rolling out super curation and something they call Proximus Passion Points. So basically they give access to the users to live, replay, and on-demand content in curated areas of specific interest for the user. So things like movies or series and hobbies and sports. And I think this is good for the user, but it also ties into that targeted advertising. I think there's again, that can translate to more value to the operator if they can achieve that.
Yeah, and I think that, you both mentioned a few things there that I agree with, where I think there's opportunities there for more intelligent and intuitiveness in both what's being served up, right, the recommendations, what's being surfaced in the aggregated experience, but also smarter opportunities for advertising. And then when you get back to a common, something that may be of common value to consumers, will be that simplification, right? Simplifying the experience of whether it's the consumption, subscription, or billing. So any way that you can streamline those pain points, I think is going to be of value to everyone that's consuming an aggregated experience. So I think the next question I'd like to pose to the panel would be the UX trend today, or trend in general, towards super aggregation, right? Bringing lots and lots of services together and all of their content together in a content-first experience. And really the premise sounds ideal, right? I mean, bringing all of the content that you're interested in, regardless of service, presented more efficiently and just really presented to you no matter where it comes from. And the thing is, we're still getting there, right? We're not quite there yet in what we see today. And what are the biggest sticking points that the industry is experiencing when it comes to delivering that vision? And as part of that, is it always appropriate to deliver a super aggregated experience? Are there circumstances where it's not ideal? And I think I'd like to hear from Michael, Rob, and Scott on this one. Michael, what are your thoughts on the super aggregation trend?
From my perspective, I think one of the biggest challenges is who owns the consumer, who owns the experience, right? And I think that's the battle that will continue to exist over the next couple of years, right? And it's clear that in addition to the aggregator or the operator and the service provider or the media company, you also have the device manufacturer, especially if you go into devices like Roku or Apple TV and so on. And all of them would like to own or control the user experience. Now, when you're inside a player experience, that is clear that you're touching upon the core of the experience, right? So if you're a Netflix or a Disney Plus, you wouldn't want to give away that experience, and you want to control that even if you're within an aggregator's environment. And that creates sort of challenges, of course, right? You want to, how do you store the data? How do you use the data to adapt the user experience for that specific consumer? Who can do that in a better way? Is it the aggregator or is it the media company? I think that's those are challenges that I think we'll just see how they will play out. But we can for sure say that there will be a fragmented experience, not necessarily for an individual consumer, but across the industry, right? Because there will be different consumers using different aggregators, and some consumers won't use aggregators at all. They would be comfortable in more of a mobile type of experience where you sort of juggle many different apps and services and jumping between them, on a regular basis. So I'm sort of I think we will see a sort of quite a long period of everyone trying out different ways of optimizing the user experience before we end up in something that will be acceptable by both the consumers and the various players in the market.
Agreed. I think it'll be interesting to hear your perspective on this from the Google perspective. Rob, what do you think about the super aggregation trend? And is it always appropriate, or where's it going?
Sure. So first, I would actually state that I don't know that it's necessarily a trend. I feel like TV in general has been a form of aggregation. It's just a different function of delivery at this stage, right? So pay TV, which is sort of where it's at right now, and transitioning or in a state of transition is its own form of aggregation. And now we're just seeing it play out slightly differently. And I think the trend that we saw was sort of the disaggregation quickly, but now it's kind of coming back together. And I think it's coming back together because you see just such a rise of content, and everybody's trying to do everything, both be the content provider and the delivery mechanism, the user experience provider, et cetera. And I think that's jarring to consumers. So they're coming back to that model that they've been very used to, which is aggregated entertainment. So that's one. Two, is it always sort of appropriate? I'd say for me, it's more about whether it's applicable or not. So I think it's appropriate, as we just talked about. There's a sort of return to it. Whether it's applicable based on the need state of the user, I think is what's really hard to discern, right? So when someone sits down, pulls out the remote and turns on the TV, what is their need state? If they know exactly what they want to watch, they want to tune in to the game that's on tonight, or they want to watch a particular show that they've had in the back of their mind that they just want to get back into or start, that need state, aggregation is not going to help a lot with. At that point, search, voice, et cetera, these are the things that these users are looking for. It's hard to predict what they're actually after. But I do think the dominant use case is the aggregation one, where the user's not really sure. They want to be entertained. We, as a platform or an app, don't really know their emotional state or their needs. So what you're trying to present to them, based on personalized recommendations, is what they might enjoy. It's basically our best guess. So I do think that's appropriate. And I think it's more and more applicable as there's just been sort of too much choice. What's holding us back from that is, it's a lot of tactical specifics of organizing this information. And I think that's where Google comes in pretty handy. I mean, our mission at Google across the board before TV has always been to organize and make the world's information accessible. And now, seeing a sort of a renewed energy and focus on that from a TV perspective. So working with partners to, work together to figure out those recommendations and that personalized experience, so that as people come in with that browsing need state, that we can satisfy with the platform.
Thanks, Rob. I'd like to finish out this question with Scott's perspective on where super aggregation is going, and any particulars that are standing in the way of perhaps achieving the idealized version of it for consumers.
Well, from a consumer perspective, and I think about the UX a lot, I think the best UX is really no UX, or the experience in which the UX falls away and you don't really have to think about it. So I also think that, what Rob sort of laid out really resonated. Think of it as a 2x2 matrix. There are the directed use case, in which I know exactly what I want. It's like, get me to season 3, episode 9 of Succession, and then get out of my way, right? Or it's an exploratory use case in which I'm looking for something new. In the exploratory use case, the UX becomes more important. I think curated promotion becomes more important. I think personalized recommendations become more important. I want to know where the studios have put their money. And if it's, Shang-Chi being promoted by Disney Plus, it goes above the fold, it's front and center. I may not have been tracking that movie, but believe me, I want to know as a consumer, when and where it is and how to watch it. So there's definitely a role for that in the discovery use cases. I think there's another sort of set of vectors here. It's linear versus VOD. And as aggregators and as platforms, we have to solve for both. But those are really different use cases, right? The VOD use case is much more about picking up where you left off or going and finding something specific. The linear use case, it may be directed. If it's a breaking news story or it's the 49ers game, get me to it, get out of the way right now. But as Zumo has seen, as Pluto has proven, that linear use case in the streaming world is hugely important. There are plenty of times when I'm not sure what I want, but I'm in the mood for sci-fi, and I might tune into Zumo's sci-fi channel because I recognize the genre. And I'm very happy to sit back, relax, or watch the Bond channel, a binge channel with nothing but James Bond. So again, to summarize, I think there's directed search and exploratory search, and then I think there's linear and VOD, and these aggregation platforms really have to cover that full landscape.
I think one aspect I'd like to touch on, since I mentioned super aggregation, is that I think there's sometimes the concern of how to stand out, right, within a super aggregated experience. And so the four of you, I think it'd be great to have all of you weigh in on this one. If a service is looking to stand out and grab the consumer, even within today's super aggregated user experiences, what are the best ways to do so? I mean, is it paid positioning? Is it being surfaced, in a preferential basis within the user experience? Is it being pre-installed on the device? What are some of the ways that services can stand out? And Brian, I'd like to hear your perspective to start on this one.
Sure. Yeah, I think pre-installation of apps is a great way to stand out. From a smart TV perspective, it is possible, maybe not easy, but it's possible to get an agreement there. So we have a customer, ORS in Austria, who has an agreement with Samsung, so that all of the Samsung TVs sold in Austria come pre-installed with the ORS app. And what makes that more compelling is that the ORS app has the ability to integrate broadcast channels by leveraging the tuner that's on the Samsung TV. So that creates customization and differentiation that's good for both Samsung and the users. Conversely, VOD providers and broadcasters can work with operators, pay TV operators, to pre-install on their set-top box devices to get the best access to that customer base. And a good example of that is Altibox in the Nordics, just rolled out recently. They are integrating, they're bundling as an option HBO with an HBO Row with deep linking. They're also having that option with Netflix. And with Netflix, the user can access Netflix in a variety of ways, through the home page, through the apps page, through the app stripe, or even the TV channel listing. But they're also offering, beyond those two apps, they're working with National Geographic, Cartoon Networks, Amazon Prime Video, and then some specialized Nordic VOD providers like TV2 Play. So those are all bundling options that the user can just select, and it comes then pre-integrated and also all in one billing cycle. So I think that's very powerful. And the other thing that Altibox is doing that can help app providers is that they have the ability to change, on the fly, the content, the style, the layout, and they can do this, for each individual content and app. So for a specific campaign, they could present the same app in a very different way, and really, again, trying to give the app provider ways of standing out.
Thank you, Brian. One person I think will have something very interesting to say here will be Stefan, especially with what's happening with Zumo these days. What's your perspective on the best way for services to stand out in this environment?
I'm the content guy on the panel for by and large, Scott and I, but I think everybody will agree, content is still king. So what you see and what you'll see into 2022 when we talk about sort of the trends of where these things are going is content differentiation, right? The services themselves, the aggregator services, the apps, and you saw Netflix do this from the beginning, right? And it's sort of following that old cable channel trajectory, right? When cable channels first launched, they had a library of content. Then they moved to sort of exclusive first window content, and then they moved into originals. And now you're seeing that across some of the providers, and you see announcements about Roku channel with originals or Tubi with originals. But everybody is looking for content differentiation to drive that use case. And then I think the second thing is once a user is inside that application, it becomes about personalization, right? How good is the personalization? How good are the services at putting something in front of the user that they want to see, or that they think they want to see, or that they didn't know they thought they wanted to see, and to keep them there and to keep them coming back. So I think it's content first experience, draw you in, and then personalization of that experience.
Thanks. And I think, Rob, let's hear your perspective on this, especially when we were thinking about Google TV in this context. How to stand out as a service, how to make the most of a super aggregated experience.
Sure. I think and it was listed in the outset of the question, there's a number of ways to stand out and quote unquote grab the consumer. I think to hold them, it's everything Stefan just mentioned. I mean, the content, you got to produce great content at the outset. And that's fundamental, right? Because any of the other sort of tactics are exactly that. You'll grab the consumer quickly and then you'll lose them if they're just not engaged with the product itself. So it starts with really solid product. The beauty of a platform like Google TV is we're working with content partners all over the world to tap into their best product, their best content, and then expose it right to our shared consumer. And while I agree with the personalized experience on sort of the second bit, not everybody has the depth of content catalogs as some. That once you're in, you can stay in forever. And again, I think that's also the benefit of partnering with the platforms and these sort of aggregated experience. Because again, the ability to have that consumer come in when they see great content, want great content, hear great content, but then leave and consume something else, because let's be honest, there's not many that are going to fulfill that need state every single day of the week, every night of the week. I think that willingness and trust that your viewers will come and go needs to be there as well, right? Because again, otherwise we're back to tactics where we're sort of trying to hold on to viewers. And I think ultimately that's just not a long-term sustainable strategy.
I agree. So let's finish out this question with Scott. What's your opinion on basically how services can stand out in an increasingly aggregated environment? Do we have Scott?
Hang on. Can you hear me all right?
Well, yeah. Yes.
Okay, there we go. Thanks. So yeah, two tracks I think really kind of emerge here. One, getting above the fold is more important than ever, right? A sea of content, a sea of services out there. So what is curated, promoted, whether that's paid or organically bubbled up through personalized recommendations, becomes absolutely critical. So there is a component of the UX which is about getting the right assets in the primary discovery pathways of the consumer. It's not enough to launch a service on a platform and expect the consumer is going to go find your app somewhere. It has to get into that primary discovery pathway. The second piece of that is, as Rob and Stefan both mentioned, is it's quality. We're in a hits-driven business, and if you don't deliver and differentiate around the content itself, you won't succeed. So differentiation is kind of an interesting dynamic here, because now more than ever, exclusives become really important. Originals become very important. Those hit series. So NBC, pulls back The Office or Friends, because that's now a differentiator for their service. Or the new movies, the new series, that HBO launches. Those become the core differentiators that really drive audience and keep audiences coming back.
Number of really good points here on how to differentiate. And I think what stood out to me is that content remains an extremely important factor in all angles of the equation. Bringing them in, of course, customer acquisition, but then even within the super aggregated experience, truly making your experience within your app, within your service, stand out, keep the consumer in the fold, so to speak. And I guess if there are those of you in the audience that are experiencing technical difficulties right now, just go ahead and refresh your browser, and it should sort it right out. And I think if we could, let's go to one of the polling questions right now. If you can pull up the results from our first polling question. And I don't know if panelists here, if you can see the result, but essentially we asked the audience, where do you think is the best place to have content aggregation, aka bringing all of your content together, occur? And so we asked them a number of choices, and the top choice was within one app where I can see all my content. The second most favored response was the interface of my smart TV or streaming media player, and that was it. They didn't respond to any of the other options. So really, the two top things were within one app, having it all brought together, and then also within the interface of my consumption device. And so, do these results surprise any of you at all, or is there anything there other than it seems to make sense? Any reactions?
I could jump in. I want to hear what Rob has to say, but no, it's not surprising at all, right? Ease of use, one place, etc. But I think that's why you see the platform-wide or the OEMs, right, with smart TVs or the connected devices, all of them really working hard on universal search, on the ability to just sort of pop to the user what they're looking for, why voice search becomes so important moving forward as well. And underneath all that, of course, I'm not the technical person, but underneath all that, of course, is the individual providers making sure that they have the right metadata connected to the platform so that that search, universal search, can work and surface their content. But it's a trend that we see all the time at Zumo, where people are not connecting lots of other devices to a smart TV, or if they're a Roku user, they are really focused on just staying within the Roku experience, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, and I think I'd like to maybe move a little bit tangentially, not too tangentially, but at least to bring up a aspect of aggregation that is very pertinent to what's going on today, which is this really fast rise of ad-supported OTT, right? And the fast consumer adoption of, ironically, fast services. And between all of these ad-supported services and their growth in popularity, and particularly fast services, they aggregate a lot of content together into a single app-based experience. And what lessons can we learn from the growing popularity of these services, and how can platform providers, content owners, and basically all the different stakeholders in the industry really latch onto this and best leverage this trend towards ad-supported content? And I want to see if Stefan, can you pitch in first?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's what Rob and Scott talked about earlier, those sort of two categories, right? Of very task-oriented, single thing, single episode that you're after, or this discovery piece. And fast really falls into that discovery piece. There's two aspects of that that are really driving the usage. One is the free part, right? So people are quickly becoming saturated, and consumers are not. Consumers are very smart when it comes to the dollars that they're spending. So when you think about people cutting cable for economic reasons, and then all of a sudden stacking up 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever bundled SVODs, all of a sudden those economics don't make sense anymore. And so the free aspect of sort of ad-supported services is number one. And then the second thing is the lean back experience. We just got done talking about how people want to just see it on their smart TVs. These are 10-foot experiences, and the idea that you're in a lean back environment where you're just watching a channel, or you're able to channel surf what's old is new again in the TV advertising. It's just how it's being delivered and the fact that there aren't these cable fees tied to it.
I think I'd like to, well, thank you for that. And I think what I want to do is actually get Rob's opinion on this, especially because it's very top of mind now with the Pluto and Google TV deal, of course. But I'd still like to hear your opinion on where you think services and content owners and other stakeholders can best take advantage of what's going on with the consumer adoption of FAST services.
Sure. A couple things, and I very much align with everything Stefan just said. Just to add, growing up, I had cable TV, which was pay TV. I never really equated it to paying for the content as much as it was the quality, because the upgrade when we finally got cable from traditional broadcast was just unbelievable, right? And then there were some premiums that were attached with it. It was sort of your big logos that sort of carried the package. But a lot of the other content that was just always on, that wasn't necessarily live, right? Because you weren't watching a live event per se. There was a ton of value in that. And I think that was what was missing over the past few years, as you saw this transition from sort of traditional pay TV to OTT, which was very much VOD driven. So I think we're tapping more into a need state than even the compellingness of the freeness, right? So I think there is an expectation that a lot of that content was never really paid for anyway. You were paying for some of the premiums and paying for some of the other truly live premium content. But a lot of what the FAST providers are bringing, or the FAST services, the FAST linear services are bringing today, is just a return to what many people, millions and millions of people, have been used to for a very long time. And if you have cut the cord and you've taken away that traditional broadcast, there was no other way to fill it. So these services are filling a gap, right? They're filling a need gap, and they're fantastic. So you mentioned our Pluto launch, which is really, I think that's the tip of the iceberg for what you'll see on the Google TV platform with respect to fast linear content that's offered and promoted in different ways that hopefully attach to those different need states, right? You'll see a lot of that coming in 22. Pluto was sort of the initial, and we have this live tab that was traditionally, when I say traditionally, it was only around for a year plus since Google TV launched, but it was relegated more to sort of the pay TV providers, the vMVPDs. And now Pluto is the first time that you're seeing that live tab exposed to everybody. Everybody that has a device has access to that, no additional cost. And it's reduced friction as well. So even for me personally, when I have a few hours free, which is rare in the middle of the day, and I want to flip something on, I'm not perusing SVOD premium services to try to find a documentary and squeeze it in. I'm throwing on a channel that's otherwise just pumping out really great content that I'm used to, that's comfortable, that fills that void. It doesn't attach to the core live use case, which is still fragmented and locked up in different areas. But again, platforms can tap into all of that via multiple partners and bring you that based on your need state, right? So for us, as soon as this panel's over, I'm racing home, date with my daughter to watch the Warriors and Steph Curry, hopefully, tie and break the record tonight. That's going to come via the platform, because I'm going to ask the platform to bring me that channel, bring me that game on, as I need it, as opposed to something that I would, browse for or find in, different types of quasi live or quasi linear services. So lots of different need states, lots of different providers. It ultimately is going to take partners to work together and platforms to sort of organize that and expose it.
Yeah, and I think you bring up the platform perspective, and it's been so interesting from my point of view to see how quickly the incorporation of FAST and AVOD content, but most especially FAST as of late, is becoming table stakes in the streaming platform competition or wars. So between Google TV and its competitors, now pretty much become a requirement competitively to incorporate some type of FAST service or expedient access to FAST services to really keep up with the state of competition. So it's very interesting to watch. And Scott, what's your opinion on this? How do services and the industry best take advantage of what's going on with consumer adoption of FAST services?
Yeah, so we launched TiVo Plus as a FAST service about 2 years ago, and today count about 163 channels from across a variety of partners. Some direct deals, some with aggregators like Pluto and Zumo as well. So I think the thing about linear, and we've touched on this a couple of times. It's what's old is new again, right? It's back to the future. That linear lean back viewing and use case is essential, right? It remains true across the television marketplace that there are more hours viewed in linear form than VOD. But I think we kind of forgot that. I think with all the OTT services coming to market over the past decade, kind of stole the spotlight. But linear marches on, and I agree, it's absolutely essential as part of any full service solution moving forward.
Yeah, agreed. I think I'd like to pitch a couple of specialized questions here before we get into our audience Q&A, and maybe we'll have a few individuals here on this panel who would best fit these questions respond. So I think there's one ahead here, actually, that I'm going to give to Brian, because I think he's well placed to answer this one. So diving in and out of multiple OTT apps and experiences to get to your content is an area of friction, I think, for the consumer that aggregation tries to solve. And that's only one part, though, consuming the content. What about hassles from the subscription and billing sides of the equation? Or is there opportunity here to solve problems as well?
Yeah, I think there is. Although, as we talked about earlier with Proximus and Altibox, there is a lot of progress being made. With that, Altibox, especially with 7, 8 plus VOD providers that they're bundling in. So I think it's good progress. There's a customer here in the U.S. that we're working with called Freecast that has an interesting model. So they've got free plus paid all in one space. But going back to the question you had earlier in terms of people want one app where they can get everything on any device. And, that's the angle that, that they're going after with their, OTT only service. So, I think progress is definitely being made, not across the board, but in a number of areas.
Thank you. And I think before we've got a few minutes left, and I'd like to definitely cover some of our audience Q&A questions because we've got a lot of really good ones queued up. I'd like to close by asking Michael about your thoughts on where aggregation in the video landscape is going to head over time. Given a shift away from the aggregation of the old pay TV experience, to disaggregation that we saw in the OTT space, and now desire to aggregate again, where ultimately does the long-term consumer equilibrium lie?
Thanks for that curveball, Paul. So it's obviously super hard to answer. I think, my perspective, for those of you who've heard me speak before, you would know that I normally say that you need to remember that every consumer is different, right? So there is no one aggregation model. There is not one equilibrium that would fit every consumer demographic, every consumer group there is, right? You need to, as an aggregator, you need to be able to figure out which types of consumers want more aggregation, more packaging, and others who would like to have more freedom themselves. Maybe there is a clever way of understanding those consumers so you can adapt the user experience over time, right? So some may want a more lean back linear experience with a full aggregation of those things, and some would like to have sort of more interaction and more freedom to choose whatever they like, right? And that's a very hard problem to just say that this is what we want to do. You need to have a personalized UX, not only personalized content.
Excellent. I think, Scott, you wanted to add to this question as well?
Yeah, so just, this is not necessarily new, but I think we're going to see an escalation between smart TV manufacturers and the big media tech platforms, right? So if the fragmentation has happened at the level of the services, a lot of the streamers, right, and the streaming devices out there, some of the big players are going to come back in, and simplification will happen at the level of the television, the living room. So I think, reaching for that Samsung remote is something consumers are definitely leaning towards. But the other sort of macro forces here will fall with Apple TV, Amazon, and Amazon Prime and Prime Video, and then Google, of course, and Android TV. I mean, the big players in the space are the ones best positioned to really solve some of those aggregation problems. And the aggregation problems, as we've been discussing, have reached this tipping point So that's where I think we're going to see a lot of the big battles waged over the next couple of years.
Yes, officially or unofficially, I agree, because I think I believe it was you, Rob, that you mentioned earlier that in the end, the TV is in and of itself a point of aggregation, right? It's that one place. Well, whether it's your TV or streaming device or whatever it is, but you're going to that one place to consume content, right? So physically, it's all coming together at one point, and whomever solves that problem, whether it's the provider of the app or it's the provider of the UX, ultimately it has to come together at that one physical interface, the TV. So very interested in seeing, especially everything that's going on now between these major industry heavyweights that do control platforms, present company included. It's going to be interesting to see how much those power struggles translate down throughout, the rest of the ecosystem. So looking forward to it. I'd like to. We have a few minutes here. I'm going to jump to a couple of our Q&A questions. I think the first one here, yes, that one, I think is perfect because it's very timely, current events. What do all of these enormous content investments mean for consumers? So the example that they gave is a $33 billion statement by Disney that they're going to invest that money towards content in 2022. Will all of this content in the pipeline just create a more and more fragmented landscape because of so much choice?
I'll jump in. I don't know that it gets any more fragmented than it is today. There's just more volume, all right, of that fragmentation. And it's going to come down to platforms and devices to ultimately and partner with those content providers to expose that content and get you into content that you will prefer, will enjoy, and hopefully broaden horizons as well. I think as we see Netflix do, by bringing global content to the world. I think you'll see it from the content providers at that scale, and then you'll see it from the platforms and other forms of distribution. But I don't necessarily think more content is going to lead to anything other than just more choice, and we'll just need the appropriate products and vehicles and whatnot to navigate that choice.
I can. Sorry, I could jump in on Rob's. I would say that it also means larger marketing budgets, right? Yeah. Larger marketing budgets and pressure on folks like Rob to develop more marketing levers to expose that content. And it also means more sort of audience development, paid placement across the different platforms.
Yeah, I'm just going to double down on what Stefan just said is absolutely true, right? We've got the distribution channels are open. The content is getting better and better. And with that flood now, it's about what, again, gets above the fold. A lot of that is going to be paid. So those marketing budgets are going to be absolutely critical. We're already seeing this with a lot of our partners now. Those marketing teams are ramping up, and a lot of them in the AVOD and FAST space, because that's the next wave of the battle, right? It's distribution is starting to settle in. The channels are there, the content is there. Well, now, in order to really win, it's about building that audience and around those brands, and a lot of that is going to be bought.
Thanks. I think before we close out here, I think I'd like to cover two more questions. And one topic that is always on the mind of everyone in this space, particularly since it's especially high within the OTT arena with so many choices today of services to subscribe to, that's churn. And so there are any particulars about churn and aggregation. How does aggregation change management of churn? Does it improve retention, and basically is it in and of itself a way to fight churn, or what does it change about the churn aspect?
So let me jump in here. I actually think this is one of the main reasons for doing the sort of what I called initially the hard bundling, right? So to make sure that there is one bill, one way of charging the consumer, because I think that will lower churn. I don't have any data here, but I'm convinced that this is certainly going to happen. It's so much easier to stay on if you have a simpler billing relationship than whether you need to manage each separate service on their own. So I think you're spot on, Paul. I think it is certainly aggregation will lower churn. I think that's a key motivator for many of the service providers to be a part of a bundle.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll jump in here. I think there's tactical ways to solve for this. Right, bundles are a great opportunity. Working on billing to the point where you have invol churn, right, where you have folks not willing to, but for a variety of technical reasons, right, just turn off your service. So there's a lot to solve for there. But I think fundamentally the vast majority of the energy should be put into the substance, right, of the product and of the offering. If you offer a great experience and people are delighted when they use your experience, they're going to come back on their own. And they may churn out for a period and they may come back, specifically thinking about content and just the cadence of different services releasing different content that's compelling. So I think, again, a bit of a plug for the platform for Google TV, but really all platforms, because everyone's trying to partner with the content providers in a way that increases value for the end consumer, and everybody shares in that value. Reducing friction everywhere you can on top of producing a great product and great content, and reducing friction, in ways of integrating with billing, integrating with recommendations, making your content shareable and exposed on the platform. That is, again, back to what I talked about earlier on the content side of, if you put great product and great content out there and trust that people will engage, if you smooth the path out and reduce the friction for them to engage. To me, that's what's ultimately maybe not even going to necessarily attack and reduce churn specifically, but it will and should increase LTV, right, over the overall lifetime of that consumer. So I just think the vast majority of energy should be put into the experience and the substance of the product, and then focus on all the tactical elements to support that.
Thanks, Rob. And I guess let's close this out. We're up against time, but we want to get one last perspective from Scott on the issue of churn.
Thanks. So I think it's been really interesting to look at the tier one media companies that also have streaming services. So just take a moment, right? Viacom CBS acquired Pluto. Comcast NBCU acquires Zumo. Fox acquires Tubi. Amazon launches IMDb TV. So what each of these tier one media companies have done is created a freemium portfolio. So here's a free service, right? Pluto, Zumo, Tubi, IMDb TV, that serves as top of funnel. So it catches consumers. And I'll use Pluto as a quick example here. If you watch Pluto for 5 minutes, you're going to see ads for Paramount Plus. They're using top of funnel free Pluto to upsell to Paramount Plus. And I'm sure we'll see more from Comcast, NBCU, and Zumo shortly. The other thing, because your question was about churn, it goes the other way, right? So these services, Paramount Plus, you don't want to pay $9.99? Okay, hold on, $4.99 with ads. Oh, you don't want to pay that? Hold on, don't leave yet, don't go away mad. We've got Pluto absolutely free. At the end of the day, those tier one media companies, the big ones, building these freemium portfolios are monetizing end to end, top to bottom, from AVOD on up to SVOD. I think that's a really interesting strategy, and one we'll see more of in the near future.
Agreed. Thank you, Scott. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today, although this is a really terrific topic. Maybe have to dig into it again in a future session. But sorry we didn't get to your questions. Those of you in the audience that had, I see quite a few here still queued up. If we didn't get to your question, please feel free to join us in a few minutes in our Zoom networking discussion, which I'd like to also invite our speakers to join if they can after this session is over, so we can all kind of discuss any more topics that we have left undiscussed. And I'd like to thank our speakers again for joining us today. We're honored to have you. Some really great content here. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience learned quite a bit as well. So thank you for your perspective today on the intertwined, I'm going to pitch this, on the intertwined nature of choice and aggregation. So I look forward to hopefully seeing all of you in a few minutes in our networking discussion. See you soon. And as mentioned, we immediately after this, we have our Zoom Rooms networking discussion on this topic. Look for the link that should have been sent to you via swap card. So click on that to join us in a few minutes. And also be sure to tune in tomorrow as we begin the second day of our end of year Future of Video series with our panel discussion on capturing the consumer video engagement strategies, sponsored by Delta Trade. Right after that discussion, we'll finish out our 2021 Future of Video series with a discussion on OTT bundling partnerships as well. So be sure to join us for those 2 great sessions tomorrow. Please also take a look here. We've got our 2022 schedule for Future of Video up on the screen, and we've got a full slate of both virtual events and, yes, a return to in-person events planned for 2022. So be sure to keep up to date and check our website for more information on our sessions for Future Video in the year ahead. Also, as a reminder, if you're interested in following the ins and outs of the OTT market in today's fast-moving streaming environment, check out our Parks Associates quarterly OTT video market tracker, which also gives monthly updates on the happenings within the OTT market. And also remember to feel free to reach out to Jason Paris and the rest of our great sales team at Parks if you're interested in research on OTT, connected devices, and any other research within the variety of areas we cover across streaming video, pay TV, consumer electronics, connectivity, digital media, and the smart home. And if you're interested in sponsorship opportunities for upcoming Future Video sessions in 2022, and you saw how many we have lined up, please feel free to reach out to Ashton Gambrell, our strategic account manager, to discuss those possibilities in detail. And once again, you can join us tomorrow as we kick off day 2 of Future Video with Capturing Consumer Video Engagement Strategies, sponsored by Delta Trade. Thanks again to everyone who joined us and to our panelists. We hope to see you in a Zoom Rooms networking discussion next, or at our 2 final Future Video sessions of the year tomorrow. Take care.